The 1970s were tough for muscle cars, but Chevrolet still managed to shine. Even in the middle of oil crises and new rules, Chevy built clever, stylish, and underrated machines that proved its brilliance. Many were forgotten, but they deserve a second look. Get ready for the 12 forgotten Chevrolet cars from the 1970s that were actually brilliant. Hidden gems, surprising innovators, and machines that deserve far more respect. Stick around till the end, and don't forget to subscribe.
The 1973 Chevelle Laguna Colonnade is one of those rare gems from the smog-choked, regulation-strangled 1970s that proves brilliance can still shine, even in difficult times. While most enthusiasts, collectors, and casual car fans immediately turn their eyes to the legendary Chevelle SS of the late 60s and early 70s, the Laguna has quietly built its own mythology. To those who really know their history, this car is not just a forgotten offshoot of the Chevelle line. It was Chevrolet's secret weapon. A car that looked like a stylish family coupe, but carried within it the DNA of a full-blooded NASCAR dominator. In hindsight, the Laguna was not simply a stopgap model. It was one of the cleverest, most innovative moves General Motors made in the muscle car era's twilight years. By 1973, the American performance car world was collapsing under the weight of emissions regulations, fuel crises, and insurance premiums that punished muscle car buyers. Chevrolet knew it had to adapt, and while the SS badge still hung around, the Laguna became the true flagship. With its colonnade body style and all-new GM design for 1973, it set itself apart with flowing lines, a more substantial presence, and most importantly, an aerodynamic front end that would become its claim to fame. The Laguna's sloped urethane nose and smoother lines weren't just cosmetic gimmicks. They were tested and refined with the singular purpose of cheating the wind. While most people saw a handsome mid-size coupe, racers and engineers saw a future NASCAR champion. And champion it was. The Laguna Colonnade went from showroom floors to the high banks of Daytona and Talladega, and it didn't just compete, it dominated. Drivers like Cale Yarborough, Darrell Waltrip, and Bobby Allison piloted the Laguna through the mid-70s, racking up wins and terrifying Ford and Dodge teams that couldn't match its balance of speed, stability, and slipperiness. NASCAR officials, seeing just how unstoppable the car was, eventually had to step in and rewrite rules to slow it down. That's the level of performance we're talking about here. A production car so good at its job that professional sanctioning bodies had to handicap it to keep racing fair. How many so-called muscle cars can claim that kind of legacy? On the street, the Laguna Colonnade was just as formidable in the right spec. Available with Chevrolet's mighty 454 cubic inch big block V8, it delivered the kind of torque that turned highways into playgrounds. Even with emissions strangling horsepower figures on paper, the raw strength of that big block made the Laguna feel alive in a way few other mid-70s cars could manage. The long wheelbase and wide stance gave it a planted, confident feel at speed, while the unique front end gave it a personality all its own, instantly recognizable to those who knew what they were looking at. Unlike the SS, which wore its performance on its sleeve, the Laguna was more subtle, more refined, but no less capable. It was a gentleman's racer, a muscle car in disguise, and that dual identity is part of what makes it so fascinating today. Collectors in 2025 are finally waking up to the Laguna's brilliance, though it still lingers in the shadows of the Chevelle SS. For decades, it was overlooked, dismissed as just another Colonnade-era GM product. But now, as enthusiasts dig deeper into history, they're realizing that the Laguna wasn't just special, it was revolutionary. Its NASCAR victories cement its place as one of the most important Chevrolets of the decade. Its styling, once polarizing, now feels refreshingly bold and purposeful. And its rarity, thanks to lower production numbers compared to the standard Chevelle, makes it a true sleeper in the collector market. Owners who were lucky enough to drive these cars in period recall how different the Laguna felt. One enthusiast reminisced, "Everybody wanted the SS, but when you pulled up in a Laguna with a 454, people took a second look. It felt smoother, more modern, but when you hit the gas, it was every bit as mean as the Chevelles that came before it." Another said, "I raced mine in local circuits and it stuck like glue compared to other big Chevys. On the highway, it felt like it was born to run 100 miles an hour all day long." The Laguna is proof that even in an era when muscle cars were being legislated out of existence, ingenuity and determination could still produce something extraordinary. It wasn't just a family coupe, it wasn't just a stopgap model. It was Chevrolet's secret weapon, a legend forged on both the streets and the track. The 1973 Laguna Colonnade deserves far more than a footnote. It deserves to stand proudly in the same conversations as the SS, the GTO, and the Roadrunner, because in its own way, it was every bit as important, every bit as thrilling, and every bit as unforgettable. Would you like me to give the same kind of over-the-top praise right up for the even rarer 1974 to 1976 Chevelle Laguna Type S3, the direct NASCAR homologation special that took the Colonnade to an even wilder level?
The 1975 Chevrolet Monza 2+2 V8 is one of those rare cases where history has been unfair. For decades, it lived in the shadow of the disastrous Vega, dismissed by most people as nothing more than a rebadged compact with a bow tie emblem slapped on its nose. But if you look closely, you see something entirely different. The Monza was Chevrolet's clever response to an impossible moment in American car culture: the oil crisis, tightening emissions rules, and the death rattle of traditional muscle cars. While the Chevelles, Roadrunners, and Mustangs were growing heavier, slower, and thirstier, the Monza quietly slipped onto the scene as a new kind of performance car. It was compact, efficient, but still had Chevrolet's beloved small-block V8 beating under its hood. In other words, it was a muscle car designed to survive in the 1970s. The styling alone set the Monza apart. Sleek, wedge-like, and clearly inspired by the European sports coupes of the day, the 2+2 had a sophistication rarely seen in an American compact. Where the Vega looked cheap and compromised, the Monza looked refined and ambitious, with crisp lines, a fastback silhouette, and proportions that made it appear more expensive than it actually was. It was the right car at the right time, borrowing design cues from Italian and German coupes while still wearing an unmistakable American stance. When parked next to bloated mid-70s intermediates, the Monza looked lithe and modern, like a glimpse into what Chevrolet's future could be. Then came the heart of the matter, the engine bay. Chevrolet's engineers worked magic here. Against all odds, they managed to shoehorn the legendary small-block V8 into this compact frame. It wasn't a simple plug-and-play. Fitting a 262 or 305 cubic inch V8 required careful re-engineering of clearances, exhaust routing, and underhood packaging. But they did it, and the result was something completely unexpected. Suddenly, this Vega cousin had the soul of a true Chevy muscle car. A lightweight body paired with a torque-rich V8 made the Monza a scrappy street fighter. It didn't have the raw horsepower of a late 60s Chevelle SS 396 or Camaro Z28, but in 1975, when most performance cars were gasping for air under emissions strangulation, the Monza V8 felt alive, quick, and relevant. It was Chevrolet proving that fun could still exist in an era when the muscle car was supposedly dead. Handling was another surprise. Thanks to its compact dimensions, relatively low weight, and a chassis tuned more tightly than Chevrolet's big coupes, the Monza had an agility that most mid-70s American cars could only dream of. Reviewers at the time even remarked that it felt European in the way it responded to steering inputs, nimble, sharp, and engaging. For younger buyers who wanted something that looked sporty, didn't drink fuel like a big block, and could still deliver some thrills, the Monza was an unexpected hero. It was an affordable entry point into muscle car ownership during a time when insurance and fuel costs were killing off the traditional options. Owners who bought them new often remember how much of an underdog the Monza was. One enthusiast recalled, "Everybody laughed when I said I had a Monza instead of a Camaro. Then they rode in it and realized it had a V8 that pulled hard and a chassis that actually wanted to turn corners. I loved proving people wrong." Another added, "It was my little hot rod during the fuel crisis. While others were selling their big blocks, I had something fun, stylish, and still affordable to run. In hindsight, the Monza was Chevrolet's forgotten experiment, a car that pointed toward the idea of smaller, lighter muscle machines long before the world was ready for them. It was unfairly tied to the Vegas reputation, but the Monza 2+2 V8 was its own animal, cleverly engineered, stylish, and surprisingly capable. In today's world, where enthusiasts celebrate oddball survivors and unique performance packages, the Monza deserves a serious reevaluation. It wasn't just a Vega clone, it was Chevrolet's bold attempt at reinventing the muscle car for a new generation. A compact coupe with the heart of a small block and the spirit of rebellion. Would you like me to also expand on the ultra-rare Monza Mirage and Monza Spider versions, which took this little fighter and pushed it even further into the world of wild 70s performance and styling?
The 1971 Chevrolet Kingswood Estate Wagon 454 is one of those magnificent contradictions that could only have come out of Detroit in the early 1970s, when carmakers still believed that more displacement was always the answer. On the surface, the Kingswood Estate was the very picture of suburban respectability. A massive 9-passenger station wagon with faux wood grain sides, acres of chrome, and a stance that suggested family vacations, Little League carpools, and hardware store runs. But hidden beneath that veneer of domestic normalcy was something outrageous, even slightly unhinged. The option to stuff Chevrolet's legendary 454 cubic inch big block V8 under the hood. The result was a family hauler with enough torque to embarrass so-called muscle cars and enough power to tow nearly anything on wheels. It was Chevrolet's slyest way of letting Dad live out his Chevelle SS fantasies while still pleasing Mom with a practical 3-row wagon. To appreciate just how wild this was, you have to picture the era. By 1971, the muscle car was already facing storm clouds. Insurance rates were spiking, emissions regulations were tightening, and the looming oil crisis was just around the corner. Yet Chevrolet still allowed you to walk into a dealership, point at the largest station wagon in the lineup, and say, "Give me the biggest motor you've got." That meant the LS4 454 V8, a torque monster that churned out 365 horsepower and over 465 pound-feet of torque in its higher trims, though wagon buyers often got a slightly detuned version for longevity. Still, even in its most restrained form, the Kingswood 454 could roast its rear tires with the flick of a throttle and pull a loaded camper trailer without breaking a sweat. And the beauty was in the disguise. On the outside, the Kingswood Estate looked like every other suburban chariot of the day. Long roof, wood grain panels, roof rack for luggage, and interiors trimmed with acres of vinyl and fake wood. It was the family car you'd expect to see parked outside a cul-de-sac ranch house, not tearing down the quarter mile. Yet enthusiasts quickly learned that when ordered with the right options, these wagons were muscle cars in all but name. They shared much of their chassis and drivetrain DNA with Chevelles and Impalas, meaning parts interchangeability was plentiful. In fact, a 454-powered Kingswood wasn't far off from an SS 454 Chevelle in terms of raw grunt. It just carried a few hundred extra pounds and 3 more seats. Owners who had them back in the day remember the paradox with fondness. One man recalled, "My dad's 71 Kingswood Estate could haul 9 kids to school, then turn around and lay rubber for half a block. It was hilarious watching people's jaws drop when a wood-paneled wagon smoked their GTO." Another added, "We took ours across the country towing a boat. That 454 never complained once, even with the AC blasting, and all of us piled in. It was unstoppable." These cars weren't just transportation, they were memories in motion, blending practicality and absurd performance in a way no modern crossover could ever dream of. Performance wagons like the Kingswood Estate 454 are celebrated today as the ultimate sleepers. Back in the early 70s, nobody thought twice about a wagon being fast. They were simply expected to be durable workhorses. But the Kingswood proved that a family man didn't have to give up his need for speed. All he had to do was hide it under a roof rack and some wood grain trim. That secret rebellion is part of what makes these wagons so legendary now. They were the secret muscle cars of their day, hiding in plain sight on every cul-de-sac and freeway. By 2025, surviving examples are incredibly rare,
because most of them lived hard lives as daily drivers, family haulers, and tow rigs. Many were scrapped, rusted away, or driven into the ground. Those that remain often command attention at shows, not just for their rarity, but because they embody such a charming contradiction. They prove that muscle cars weren't only about two-door coupes and high-strung performance packages. They could also take the form of a three-row wagon that could tow your trailer, haul your kids, and still blow the doors off a Mustang at a stoplight. The 1971 Chevrolet Kingswood Estate Wagon 454 is more than a curiosity. It's a reminder that muscle came in many shapes and sizes during the golden era, and sometimes the most powerful punch was thrown by the car least expected to fight. Would you like me to expand on how NASCAR and drag racers sometimes secretly used wagons like the Kingswood for towing, and how they occasionally ended up racing them for fun, shocking everyone in the process?
The 1977 Chevrolet Concours is one of those fascinating curiosities in GM's lineup that most people either forgot existed or dismissed as just another Nova. But when you peel back the layers, you discover that the Concours was a surprisingly ambitious experiment by Chevrolet to take the humble blue-collar Nova platform and dress it up as a smaller, more affordable Cadillac for the middle class. At first glance, you might laugh at the idea. After all, the Nova was known as a simple, no-nonsense compact car, a favorite of budget-minded families and hot rodders alike. But in the mid to late 1970s, Detroit was scrambling to reinvent itself after the fuel crisis, and buyers were shifting toward downsized luxury. Chevrolet's answer was to create a personal luxury version of the Nova, something plush enough to compete with Ford's Granada Ghia and Chrysler's LeBaron, yet still familiar and affordable to the Chevy faithful. The result was the Concours, a car that looked like a Nova but carried itself with a surprising touch of class. Where the standard Nova was plain and practical, the Concours tried to exude elegance. It featured unique styling touches such as opera windows, padded vinyl roofs, extra chrome, wire wheel covers, and richer color palettes. Inside, Chevrolet went all in with plush velour upholstery, deep pile carpeting, faux wood grain trim, and quieter insulation to create a sense of refinement. For buyers who wanted something more dignified than a Camaro, but smaller and thriftier than an Impala, the Concours offered exactly that, a mini luxury car that gave you a taste of Cadillac without the Cadillac price tag. Under the hood, the Concours still carried plenty of traditional Chevrolet muscle DNA. Buyers could spec it with 6-cylinder engines if they wanted economy, but many opted for small block V8s, with displacements ranging from the 305 to the 350 cubic inch, and in earlier model years, even the 400 V8. While horsepower ratings were modest by pre-1972 standards due to emissions and smog controls, the small-block, torque-heavy small blocks provided smooth, confident cruising power that suited the car's more upscale image. Unlike the rough-and-ready base Nova, the Concours wasn't about burning rubber. It was about wafting down the highway in comfort while still having enough grunt under the hood to remind you that this was, after all, still a Chevrolet. What really made the Concours special was the attempt to shift perception. Chevrolet wanted to elevate the Nova's image from economy workhorse to something aspirational. Period advertisements touted its international styling and refinement, comparing it to European luxury compacts. In truth, it was more of a uniquely American take on luxury. Big seats, soft ride, chrome sparkle, and just enough V8 rumble to keep the driver entertained. It was aimed at upwardly mobile families who wanted to show a little style without blowing the budget. Owners who bought these cars in the 70s often recall them with a mix of fondness and surprise. One former owner said, "I bought my Concours new in 1977 because I couldn't afford a Cadillac, but I wanted something nice. People couldn't believe it was a Nova. It felt like a much bigger car inside, and the ride was smooth as butter." Another joked, "It was the only Nova that my wife would ride in without complaining. It had velvet seats, for crying out loud." These anecdotes underline the unique appeal of the Concours. It wasn't flashy muscle, but it was muscle with manners, something rare in Chevrolet's lineup at the time.
By today's standards, the Concours is a forgotten gem. Most Novas were either driven into the ground or hacked up into drag strip projects, leaving very few Concours models surviving in decent condition. Collectors often overlook them because they lack the raw muscle car credentials of the earlier SS Novas or the cultural impact of Camaros and Chevelles. But those who appreciate automotive oddities see the Concours as a time capsule, a Nova in a tuxedo, representing GM's attempt to ride the wave of downsized luxury while still keeping its muscle car heritage alive under the hood. In 2025, a well-preserved Concours is both rare and intriguing. It's not a car you buy to win races, but rather to spark conversations. Park wanted a show, and enthusiasts will do a double take. They'll recognize the Nova shape, but be puzzled by the opera windows, vinyl roof, and plush interior. Then they'll smile because it embodies that quirky 1970s charm when automakers tried just about anything to keep buyers interested. The 1977 Chevrolet Concours deserves more respect than it gets. It may not have the brute force of an SS Chevelle or the prestige of a Cadillac Eldorado, but in its own subtle way, it blended muscle car roots with personal luxury styling to create something unique. It was Chevrolet's mini luxury muscle liner, a forgotten chapter in GM's history that reminds us muscle didn't always have to scream. It could also whisper, with velvet seats and opera windows as it cruised down Main Street. Would you like me to expand further on how the Concours fit into the broader trend of personal luxury cars in the 70s, like the Monte Carlo, Thunderbird, and Grand Prix, and why Chevy thought the Nova platform was the right place to experiment?
The 1970 Chevrolet Monte Carlo SS 454 is one of those rare cars that straddled two worlds at once, the booming era of American muscle and the rising trend of personal luxury. Most people, when they think of Chevrolet muscle in 1970, picture the Chevelle SS or perhaps a Camaro Z28 with their raw aggression and street racing spirit. The Monte Carlo, by comparison, often gets left out of the conversation, written off as the fancy coupe for middle-aged buyers. But in truth, the Monte Carlo SS was an absolutely brilliant creation, an elegant, long-hooded cruiser that could play the part of a refined gentleman's car while still hiding the heart of a brawler underneath its smooth lines. The Monte Carlo was introduced in 1970 as Chevrolet's first true entry into the personal luxury coupe market, a segment that Ford's Thunderbird and Pontiac's Grand Prix had already established as a goldmine. GM's strategy was clever. Take the intermediate A-body platform shared with the Chevelle, stretch it with a long wheelbase up front for a statelier appearance, and clothe it in a body that emphasized sophistication over muscle. The Monte Carlo's sweeping fenders, thin grille, long hood, and short deck were designed to look upscale and dignified, more in line with a European grand touring car than a drag strip bruiser. Inside, it was trimmed with wood grain accents, bucket seats, and comfort-focused features that felt more Buick than Chevrolet. But Chevrolet wasn't about to leave performance buyers out of the picture. Enter the Monte Carlo SS 454 package, a wolf in a tailored suit. This wasn't just some appearance trim. Ticking the SS box brought Chevrolet's largest and most powerful engine, the LS5, rated at 360 horsepower and packing a wall of torque that could move the nearly 2-ton Monte Carlo with startling authority. And for those who wanted to get truly wild, Chevy quietly allowed buyers to order the LS6 454, the very same engine available in the legendary Chevelle SS 454, pumping out a brutal 450 horsepower. Only a handful of Monte Carlos left the factory with the LS6, making them among the rarest and most fearsome sleepers of the muscle car era. What made the Monte Carlo SS 454 so brilliant was its dual personality. On one hand, you could drive it to a business meeting or dinner date, enjoying its quiet ride, power steering, and luxury touches, and nobody would confuse it with a drag strip car. On the other hand, when you buried your right foot, that big block Thunder would remind you that this was no ordinary coupe. The long wheelbase gave it a stable, composed ride at speed, and while it wasn't as nimble as a Chevelle SS, the Monte Carlo carried itself with sort of grand, unhurried authority, as if daring challengers to underestimate it.
Owners from the time often speak fondly of the surprise factor. One 1970 SS owner recalled, "People thought it was just a pretty car. Then I'd light up the tires and leave them in a cloud of smoke, and their jaws would drop. It was like a Chevelle in a tuxedo." Another put it even more directly. "It was the best of both worlds. I could drive my wife to dinner in comfort, then race the kid down the street in his Camaro and win." The Monte Carlo SS also marked an important cultural shift in muscle cars. By 1970, buyers wanted not just raw horsepower, but also comfort and prestige. The Monte Carlo showed that you didn't have to choose. You could have a car that looked classy and mature while still packing enough power to humble almost anything on the road. In that sense, it foreshadowed the muscle luxury balance that cars like the Buick Riviera GS and Oldsmobile Toronado tried to achieve, but with more muscle credibility thanks to the Chevelle DNA under its skin. Today, the 1970 Monte Carlo SS 454 is still overshadowed by its Chevelle sibling, but enthusiasts are finally waking up to its appeal. Survivors are rarer than you'd think, and the few LS6-equipped cars that exist are highly prized unicorns. Even the more common LS5 cars offer a blend of style, power, and comfort that few other muscle cars can match. Where the Chevelle screams for attention, the Monte Carlo nods politely and then blows past you with effortless torque. In 2025, the Monte Carlo SS deserves to be celebrated as one of Chevrolet's cleverest muscle cars. It was a car that didn't need stripes, spoilers, or a loud image to prove itself. It was about subtle strength, a hidden beast wrapped in refinement. The fact that it could compete with the best muscle machines of its era while carrying itself with elegance makes it one of the most underrated legends of the 1970s, a brilliant balance of speed and class that no Chevelle or Camaro could quite replicate. Would you like me to go deeper into the ultra-rare LS6 Monte Carlo SS versions and how they've become holy grails among collectors today?
The 1975 Chevrolet Cosworth Vega is one of the most fascinating what-ifs in American automotive history. A car that took one of the worst mass-market vehicles of the era and, almost against all odds, turned it into something remarkable. The base Vega, infamous for its overheating, engine failures, and corrosion issues, earned a reputation as a cautionary tale for GM. But in a limited, hand-built experiment, Chevrolet collaborated with Cosworth Engineering, the British racing specialists renowned for their Formula One and European sports car engines, to create the Cosworth Vega. The result was a car that, for a brief shining moment, brought exotic, European-style performance to an American compact, a completely different beast from the pedestrian, flawed Vega it was based on. At the heart of the Cosworth Vega was an all-aluminum, twin-cam 2.0-liter four-cylinder designed to rev high and reward skillful driving. Hand-built in extremely limited numbers, only around 3,500 were ever produced, each engine was a marvel of precision engineering for its time. Unlike the mass-produced Vega engines, which suffered from poor metallurgy and weak design, the Cosworth unit was built with tight tolerances, advanced cam profiles, and meticulous attention to detail. The result was roughly 110 horsepower at a time when most small American compacts barely managed 90. But more importantly, it delivered that power smoothly all the way up to 6,500 RPM. This wasn't a brute force muscle car. It was a high-revving technical machine that demanded respect behind the wheel. The Cosworth Vega's chassis, though still based on the flawed Vega platform, benefited from upgraded suspension components, stiffer springs, and better handling geometry. It was a small, lightweight car, and that made it surprisingly nimble, with a precise steering feel that belied its humble American origins. Drivers who experienced it often compared it favorably to European sports cars of the period, noting that it required concentration and finesse. This wasn't a car you could bludgeon down the road and expect excitement. It rewarded engagement, timing, and patience, much like an Alfa Romeo or a Triumph of the era.
The 1973 Chevrolet Caprice Classic Coupe is one of those fascinating contradictions in automotive history. A car that is often dismissed as a bloated, gas-suckling land yacht, yet in reality, it was a masterclass in combining American luxury, style, and muscle. At first glance, the Caprice might seem like a lumbering cruiser, designed only for gliding down wide suburban streets. But look closer and you discover a car that blends elegance and presence with genuine performance potential, a vehicle that quietly competed with Lincoln and Cadillac without screaming for attention. In many ways, the Caprice Classic Coupe represented Chevrolet's vision of what a true personal luxury car could be in the early 1970s, a blend of comfort, sophistication, and understated power. Stylistically, the 1973 Caprice Coupe was striking. While most large American cars of the era favored boxy, awkward proportions, the Caprice featured flowing, graceful lines that gave it a sense of motion even when standing still. Its long hood, sweeping fenders, and elegantly sculpted roofline conveyed dignity and presence, while the chrome accents, vinyl top options, and understated grille signaled luxury without excess. This was a car that could sit in a driveway next to a Cadillac Eldorado and not look out of place, yet it was still unmistakably Chevrolet, a unique combination of accessibility and prestige. Inside, the Caprice was a sanctuary. Plush seats, deep carpeting, wood grain trim, and wide dashboards wrapped passengers in comfort, creating an environment suited as much for leisurely Sunday drives as for the long cross-country trips that were common in the 70s. Under the hood, the Caprice Classic Coupe offered more than just style and comfort. While it could be equipped with modest six-cylinder engines for economy-minded buyers, the car truly came alive with its big block V8 options. The 396, 427, and later the 454 cubic inch engines delivered impressive torque and smooth, effortless acceleration for a vehicle of its size. Unlike the more aggressive Chevelle or Camaro, the Caprice's power was refined. It could move its nearly 2-ton frame with authority, yet the ride remained composed and luxurious. It was a car that could handle a long highway run in serene comfort, then assert itself at the stoplight with surprising vigor. This combination of size, style, and performance was rare in the early 1970s, and demonstrated Chevrolet's ability to produce a vehicle that could satisfy both luxury and performance enthusiasts. Owners from the era often recall the Caprice Classic Coupe as a car that felt special without being flashy. One enthusiast remembered, "People laughed at my Caprice when it pulled up next to a Mustang or Chevelle, but once you floored it, they realized the power hiding under that long hood. It was big, smooth, and fast, all at the same time." Another noted, "You could drive across states in it, fully loaded with luggage and family, and barely notice the weight. Yet when you wanted to, it could assert itself with authority. That's the magic of the Caprice Coupe." What made the 1973 Caprice Classic Coupe even more remarkable was its timing. The early 70s were a transitional period for American cars. Muscle cars were being throttled by emissions regulations, insurance rates were climbing, and buyers were beginning to favor comfort over raw speed. Chevrolet's Caprice Coupe offered a perfect compromise. It provided a luxurious, quiet ride for long-distance comfort, yet didn't abandon the performance heritage that had made Chevy cars iconic. It was, in essence, a personal luxury car that could hold its own both in elegance and on the open road, bridging the gap between mass-market comfort and prestige. Today, surviving Caprice Classic Coupes are often overlooked in favor of flashier muscle cars or exotic luxury models. Yet those who appreciate them understand their unique place in automotive history. They're beautifully proportioned, comfortable, and surprisingly capable under the right conditions. The Caprice Classic Coupe exemplifies Chevrolet's skill at blending refinement, performance, and style into a cohesive package that few competitors could match at the time. It's a car that rewards careful appreciation, one that proves you don't always need a small, nimble sports car to have fun behind the wheel. In 2025, the 1973 Caprice Classic Coupe stands as a reminder that American cars could be luxurious, beautiful, and powerful all at once. It wasn't just a land yacht, as critics might suggest. It was a thoughtfully designed, finely executed personal luxury coupe that hit the sweet spot between Cadillac sophistication and Chevrolet accessibility. Quietly brilliant, elegantly powerful, and underappreciated for decades, it remains one of the most graceful and capable large American coupes of the 1970s.
If you want, I can expand further into the rare options and big block variants of the Caprice Coupe, including the full-bore 454-equipped models that turned a seemingly sedate luxury cruiser into a sleeper muscle machine.
The 1971 Chevrolet El Camino SS 402 occupies a unique place in automotive history, a vehicle that effortlessly blends two worlds most manufacturers never dared to combine, the muscle car and the pickup truck. While the El Camino name often drew skepticism, why would anyone want a car-truck hybrid? The 1971 SS 402 proved that Chevrolet understood exactly what it was doing. Unlike the Chevelle SS coupes that were flashy, short-wheelbase bruisers designed for drag strips and street corners, the El Camino offered practicality without sacrificing the very essence of muscle. It was the perfect car for the working man who wanted a vehicle that could carry a load to the job site on Monday, haul the weekend camper on Friday, and still leave a Mustang or Camaro spinning at a traffic light. The heart of the SS 402 was, unsurprisingly, the big block V8. Rated at 402 cubic inches, Chevy's clever marketing rounding up from 400 to make the engine sound more menacing, it produced between 360 and 375 horsepower, depending on the configuration, and more than 450 pound-feet of torque. In a lightweight El Camino chassis, that torque translated into frighteningly quick launches, enough to smoke the tires even with a full bed load. The SS 402 wasn't a stripped-down street rager either. It came with the usual SS performance upgrades, such as heavy-duty suspension, front disc brakes, rally wheels, and sometimes even the M22 Rock Crusher 4-speed transmission. This was a vehicle designed not only to carry cargo, but to carry it with authority, style, and an unmistakable presence on the road. Styling was another strong point. Unlike the base El Caminos, which were purely utilitarian, the SS 402 incorporated cues from the Chevelle SS, giving it aggressive lines, dual stripes on the hood and tailgate, and bold badging that signaled muscle without being ostentatious. The long hood, sleek cabin, and the subtle flares gave it an athletic stance, while the bed remained functional, a reminder that this wasn't just a show pony. The El Camino SS 402 managed to look purposeful and aggressive without ever veering into the cartoonish or awkward, a balance that few other car-truck hybrids could achieve. The El Camino SS 402's versatility was part of its genius. It offered true pickup utility, a sizable bed for hauling tools, equipment, or recreational gear, but you could also drop in a trailer, load a weekend of camping gear, or even tow another car if necessary. But it never lost its soul as a muscle car. Drivers from the era often recall the sheer shock factor of merging onto highways or pulling away from stoplights with the SS 402. People would look at me like I was crazy. A guy in a Camaro or GTO would rev up, thinking he had the advantage. A second later, I'd disappear in my El Camino with a full bed of tools behind me. It was hilarious and humiliating for them. Mechanically, the SS 402 balanced raw muscle with refinement. The chassis, borrowed from the Chevelle, handled much better than one would expect for a pickup, especially with the SS suspension package. Steering was precise for its size, and the ride, while firmer than a standard El Camino, was still comfortable enough for long drives. Chevrolet had crafted a vehicle that could serve as a daily driver, a weekend warrior, and a low-key drag strip competitor all at once, a trifecta few cars could claim. Today, the 1971 El Camino SS 402 remains one of the most celebrated car-truck hybrids in American muscle lore. While the Chevelle SS 396 or Camaro Z28 might attract the headlines, the SS 402 appeals to enthusiasts who understand that performance doesn't always come in a two-door coupe shell. It's a working man's muscle car, practical, powerful, and stylish in a way that never compromises either side of its identity. In 2025, surviving examples are increasingly rare, often coveted for their combination of utility and hidden speed, as well as the unique nostalgia they evoke for an era when American automakers were unafraid to blend categories and take bold risks. The 1971 Chevrolet El Camino SS 402 is more than a novelty. It's a brilliant, dual-purpose performance machine that delivers muscle car thrills and a pickup body. It stands as proof that American muscle wasn't just about two-door coupes. It could also live in a long bed, still smoking tires, while carrying your weekend gear. A perfect union of form, function, and sheer power. The SS 402 deserves far more respect than it often receives in muscle car discussions.
If you want, I can expand even further with stories of rare options, the M22 Rock Crusher manual-equipped models, and how some SS402s were secretly used for drag racing right out of their truck beds.
The 1978 Chevrolet Malibu Classic Landau Coupe is one of those fascinating hidden gems from the late muscle era, a period often dismissed as the death throes of American performance. On paper, the late 70s Malibu might look like a heavy, smog-strangled car that symbolized the decline of Detroit muscle. Downsized for emissions regulations, weighed down with safety features, and offered in a body style that some enthusiasts viewed as unexciting. But the Landau Coupe was more than just a leftover nameplate. It was a cleverly engineered, surprisingly balanced vehicle that quietly earned a place in the hearts of drag racers and muscle enthusiasts alike. Stylistically, the 1978 Malibu Classic Landau Coupe carried the elegance of a personal luxury car, with the signature padded Landau roof, opera windows, and understated chrome trim. Unlike the brash Chevelle SSs of earlier years, the Malibu Landau's lines were refined and composed, giving it a sleeper appeal. On the street, it looked like a relaxed cruiser, the kind of car your uncle might have taken to church on Sunday or to a grocery store run. But beneath that calm exterior was a car with genuine potential, especially when optioned correctly. Under the hood, buyers could spec a small block V8, typically the 305 or 350 cubic inch engines. While smog-era ratings were modest, usually between 145 and 175 horsepower, these engines were light, reliable, and rev-happy enough to make the Malibu an agile performer. The combination of a relatively lightweight body and well-tuned suspension allowed the Landau Coupe to corner better than most of its contemporaries, making it a surprisingly nimble platform for drag racing enthusiasts. Unlike the big block monsters that crushed their tires in a straight line but struggled in turns, the Landau offered balance, predictability, and a quiet cunning that rewarded skilled drivers. Drag racers and sleeper hunters quickly learned the value of the Malibu Classic Landau Coupe. While it lacked the screaming horsepower of an earlier Chevelle SS or Monte Carlo, it could be lightened, tuned, and upgraded into a deceptive competitor. A typical build might include swapping in a higher output small block V8, upgrading carburetors, exhaust, and rear gears, transforming the seemingly docile cruiser into a car capable of mid to low 14-second quarter miles, more than respectable for a late 70s muscle platform. Owners would often recall the sheer surprise of seeing their Malibu quietly leave more ostentatious cars in the dust, a testament to the car's hidden potential. Beyond straight-line performance, the 1978 Malibu Landau Coupe also offered comfort and refinement that earlier muscle cars often sacrificed. The suspension was tuned for a smooth ride, the seats were wide and supportive, and the interior was designed for luxury, featuring vinyl-trimmed surfaces and optional wood grain accents. You could drive it to work, cruise the boulevard, or take it on a weekend trip without ever feeling like you were in a race car. Yet it retained the capability to deliver real performance when demanded. That duality, comfort and capability, made the Landau Coupe an appealing choice for enthusiasts who wanted both a practical car and a hidden performer. Collectors today often overlook the late 70s Malibus, dismissing them as tired, downsized models of the post-muscle era. But savvy enthusiasts know that the 1978 Malibu Classic Landau Coupe represents one of the last opportunities to find a nimble, balanced, and stylish Chevrolet platform that can be upgraded into a true sleeper. Surviving examples are rare, partly because many were driven hard as family cars and left to rust, but those that remain are prized for their understated elegance, lightweight, and tunable small block engines. The 1978 Chevrolet Malibu Classic Landau Coupe stands as a quiet reminder that not all late-era cars were washed-up relics. It may not have the flamboyance of a 1970s Chevelle or Monte Carlo, but it combines style,
balance, and hidden performance in a way that makes it one of the sleeper stars of the era. The Landau Coupe proved that even when muscle seemed to be fading, Chevrolet could still produce cars that were fun, agile, and surprisingly quick. An underrated gem for enthusiasts who know how to look past the padded roof and quiet exterior to see the car's true potential. If you like, I can expand even further with stories of specific drag racing builds, sleeper modifications, and how some Malibus quietly outpaced cars twice their supposed performance level.
The 1972 Chevrolet Biscayne 427 stands as one of the most fascinating paradoxes of the early 1970s American muscle car era. A vehicle that juxtaposed extreme performance with an almost laughably utilitarian package. On the surface, the Biscayne was the embodiment of Chevrolet's entry-level philosophy, a straightforward, no-nonsense full-size sedan. It lacked the glamour of a Caprice or Monte Carlo. There was no vinyl roof, no luxury trim, no opera windows, and certainly no flashy racing stripes. It was, in every respect, the kind of car that a practical family or a budget-conscious buyer might select to handle daily errands or long road trips. Yet Chevrolet's genius lay in the fact that beneath this austere exterior, buyers could opt for the 427 cubic inch big block V8, a monstrous engine that could transform a simple budget sedan into one of the fastest cars on the road. The 427 engine in the 1972 Biscayne was nothing short of a brute. Depending on the configuration, it could deliver up to 425 horsepower and over 460 pound-feet of torque, a figure that, in such a light, stripped-down full-size chassis, made the Biscayne capable of explosive acceleration. Unlike the Chevelle or Monte Carlo, which often carried extra weight from luxury or sport packages, the Biscayne's minimalistic approach meant that nearly every pound contributed directly to performance. The big block V8 could propel the car from 0 to 60 miles per hour in the low 6-second range under the right conditions, while quarter-mile times could dip into the low 13-second territory, a jaw-dropping achievement for what most observers perceived as a pedestrian family sedan. This was muscle car performance delivered in a completely unassuming sleeper disguise. The visual design of the 1972 Biscayne 427 further amplified this effect. Its styling was simple and understated, with clean, straight lines, modest chrome accents, and a tall, boxy stance that projected reliability rather than aggression. This was a car that could sit in a suburban driveway or cruise a city street without attracting undue attention. Yet beneath the hood lurked one of Chevrolet's most potent engines. This contrast created a perfect sleeper. Other drivers and enthusiasts might glance at the Biscayne and dismiss it as mundane, only to be utterly shocked when the driver pressed the accelerator and the rear tire struggled to maintain traction. For enthusiasts who understood the combination of lightweight and big block torque, the Biscayne 427 became the ultimate wolf in sheep's clothing. Owners and contemporary drivers often recall the Biscayne 427 with amazement at its dual nature. One owner reminisced, "People would see me roll up in a plain blue Biscayne and smirk. Then I'd hammer the throttle and their flashy GTO or Chevelle SS would be in my rearview mirror, confused and defeated. There was nothing flashy about it, and that was the fun part. It was the ultimate surprise." Another enthusiast described the car as a working man's dragster, noting how the combination of lightweight, big block torque, and simple, durable suspension made it a reliable yet fearsomely quick platform for street racing. Unlike higher trim models, the Biscayne 427 didn't need expensive maintenance or special handling. It was raw, honest muscle that could be driven hard every day. The 1972 Biscayne 427 also occupies a unique cultural niche in muscle car history. By 1972, insurance premiums for high-performance cars were rising rapidly, emissions regulations were starting to sap horsepower, and many buyers were seeking affordability over excess. Chevrolet's strategy of offering its largest engines in its most basic, affordable models was brilliant. It allowed buyers to get true muscle without the added cost or image of a Chevelle SS, Monte Carlo, or Camaro.
This democratization of performance meant that a young worker, a blue-collar enthusiast, or a family man could have an engine capable of humiliating far more expensive cars at a stoplight, drag strip, or highway run. In a very real sense, the Biscayne 427 was the working-class hero of early 70s American muscle car, providing incredible power without pretense. Mechanically, the 1972 Biscayne 427 could be optioned with various transmissions, including the durable turbo-hydromatic automatic or the sought-after M21 or M22 4-speed manual, the latter giving drivers a full-blown dragster experience. Rear axle ratios could also be selected to optimize either cruising comfort or quarter-mile performance, and some rare combinations included heavy-duty suspension packages to better handle the immense torque. These choices made certain Biscaynes true unicorns today, cars that combine rarity, performance, and historical significance in a way that very few American sedans of the era can match. In modern times, the Biscayne 427 is rightly celebrated among collectors and muscle car enthusiasts as one of Chevrolet's most underappreciated sleepers. Its rarity, understated styling, and extreme performance make it a highly desirable find. Yet it retains the charm of a car that could blend into any parking lot without drawing attention. Unlike its flashier counterparts, which often scream for admiration, the Biscayne 427 achieves its legend quietly, leaving only the evidence of scorching tires and awestruck onlookers to testify to its capabilities. The 1972 Chevrolet Biscayne 427 is more than just a muscle car. It is a study in contrast and clever engineering. It embodies the idea that performance does not need to be ostentatious to be terrifying. It was cheap, it was light, it was brutally fast, and it was a surprise to everyone who underestimated it. In the annals of muscle car history, few vehicles combine accessibility, raw power, and sleeper stealth as perfectly as the Biscayne 427. It remains a timeless reminder that sometimes the greatest thrills come in the plainest packages, and that true muscle often hides where no one is looking. If you want, I can expand even further into the rarest factory options, production numbers, and the surviving examples today, including the legendary M22 manual-equipped Biscayne 427s that became street and drag strip legends.
The 1977 Chevrolet Impala Coupe is one of those remarkable late 70s Chevys that seems forgotten by most enthusiasts, yet it perfectly embodies the balance between style, practicality, and understated performance. By the mid-1970s, the Impala nameplate, once a titan of American full-size cars, had slipped from the forefront of automotive culture. Muscle cars were fading under stricter emissions regulations, insurance rates were rising, and downsizing had begun to dominate GM's planning. Yet, the 1977 Impala Coupe managed to remain relevant, offering families and law enforcement alike a vehicle that combined affordability, durability, and surprising versatility. It was a full-size car that could carry a household, serve as a police cruiser, and still feel like a proper Chevrolet behind the wheel. Styling was one of the Impala Coupe's strongest points. Chevrolet managed to retain the car's classic long hood, short deck proportions while softening lines for the era's changing tastes. Its broad, flat front end, long, flowing roofline, and understated chrome accents gave it a presence on the road that was neither ostentatious nor bland. The coupe body, with its two doors and slightly more sportier stance compared to the sedan, added a subtle flair that made it more appealing to younger buyers or those who wanted a car that felt less like a moving living room. Inside, the Impala was spacious, comfortable, and practical, featuring wide bench seats, plenty of headroom, and a dashboard layout that balanced functionality with a touch of class. Families could cruise in comfort, while law enforcement officers appreciated the roomy interior for patrol duties. Under the hood, the 1977 Impala Coupe offered a range of engines, from the modest inline-6 to a variety of small and big block V8s. The base V8s were sufficient for everyday driving, but the more powerful 350 and 400 cubic inch small blocks provided ample performance,
delivering smooth acceleration and a satisfying exhaust note. While it wasn't a drag strip monster like earlier Chevelles or late 60s Impalas, the car's full-size frame and well-tuned suspension allowed for comfortable high-speed cruising, and the bigger V8s could still hold their own at stoplights or on open highways. The combination of durable powertrains, simple engineering, and generous size made the Impala Coupe a favorite among owners who valued longevity as much as performance. The Impala Coupe's versatility was further enhanced by its reputation for durability and practicality. Police departments across the country frequently selected full-size Chevys for patrol duties, and the 1977 Impala Coupe was no exception. Its roomy interior, reliable drivetrain, and comfortable ride made it ideal for long hours on the road. Families too appreciated the car's spacious trunk and sturdy construction, which could handle daily errands, weekend road trips, and even towing small trailers. The Impala Coupe bridged the gap between utility and comfort, proving that a full-size car could still be stylish, enjoyable, and functional all at once. What makes the 1977 Impala Coupe truly remarkable, however, is its legacy as a forgotten classic. Enthusiasts often overlook it in favor of flashier Chevelles or Monte Carlos, yet it embodies a rare combination. It is large but manageable, affordable but dignified, and practical but capable of surprising performance with the right engine choice. Owners often recount stories of quietly outpacing more ostentatious cars at intersections, or effortlessly covering hundreds of miles in comfort. Its understated nature and widespread use mean that despite its ubiquity in the past, well-preserved examples are increasingly rare today, giving collectors and enthusiasts an opportunity to rediscover a car that excels in multiple dimensions. The 1977 Chevrolet Impala Coupe stands as a testament to Chevrolet's skill in balancing size, power, and utility. It may not have the instant allure of a Camaro, Chevelle, or Monte Carlo, but it delivers a combination of comfort, style, and durability that few other cars of the late 70s could match. It is a car for those who appreciate subtle excellence, the thrill of a dependable V8, and the practicality of a true full-size American coupe. Families loved it, police officers depended on it, and today it quietly endures as a brilliant yet underappreciated example of late 70s American automotive ingenuity. If you like, I can expand even further with stories of rare high-performance trims, optional big-block engines, and how some 1977 Impala Coupes became sleeper street legends despite their conservative appearance.
The 1976 Chevrolet Monte Carlo Landau represents a perfect convergence of style, comfort, and performance in the mid-1970s American personal luxury car segment. By this point, the Monte Carlo name had truly matured, shedding the experimental identity of its early years and settling into a formula that resonated with buyers who wanted more than just raw power. They wanted presence, sophistication, and a car that made a statement without being ostentatious. The Landau trim, introduced to elevate the Monte Carlo experience, turned the coupe into a vehicle that blended traditional muscle car appeal with a level of refinement and luxury that few competitors could match. It wasn't simply about speed or handling, it was about lifestyle, image, and the subtle thrill of commanding a car that felt exclusive yet approachable. Visually, the 1976 Monte Carlo Landau was a masterpiece of proportion and restrained elegance. Its long hood, sweeping roofline, and slightly truncated rear deck gave it a poised, aerodynamic look, while the Landau's signature vinyl roof, opera windows, and chrome accents added a layer of sophistication that set it apart from its plain Monte Carlo siblings. The coupe's presence on the street was commanding yet tasteful. It drew attention without screaming for it. Inside, Chevrolet spared no effort. Plush bucket seats or optional bench configurations, rich velour or vinyl upholstery, wood grain trim, and thoughtfully laid out dashboards created an environment that felt luxurious and inviting. For buyers in the mid-70s, the Monte Carlo Landau was more than a car. It was a personal statement of taste, success, and discerning judgment.
Underneath the elegant exterior, the Monte Carlo Landau remained grounded in Chevrolet's performance DNA. Engine options ranged from the reliable small-block V8s to the potent 454 cubic inch big block, which could deliver upwards of 360 to 370 horsepower depending on the setup. Unlike the raw, no-frills muscle cars of earlier years, the Monte Carlo combined this power with a suspension tuned for comfort and stability, making long-distance cruising effortless while still retaining the ability to surprise a Mustang, Camaro, or Chevelle at a stoplight. The Landau trim did not dilute the performance, it simply offered it in a more refined, sophisticated package, a balance that few cars of the era could achieve. The 1976 Monte Carlo Landau was also a triumph in marketing and cultural positioning. Chevrolet understood that buyers in the mid-70s were shifting their priorities. Insurance costs for high-performance cars were rising, the muscle car boom was waning, and personal luxury cars were gaining traction as symbols of style and status. By wrapping the Monte Carlo in Landau luxury trim, Chevrolet created a car that appealed to a broader audience, one that wanted performance without sacrificing refinement, and image without the garishness of an overtly sporty coupe. It became a car that families, executives, and enthusiasts could all appreciate, a rare combination that helped it dominate sales charts and endure as a cultural icon. Owners from the era recall the Monte Carlo Landau as a car that offered both presence and performance in equal measure. One driver remembered, "It was my dream car. I could pull up to a party and look elegant, then hit the highway and actually feel like I was driving something alive." People were always surprised at how much muscle this car had under the hood, yet it felt smooth, composed, and utterly sophisticated. Another noted, the Landau trim made it feel like a personal luxury coupe from Europe, but it had American V8s that could embarrass anything in its lane. It was a rare balance, grace and power in one package. Today, the 1976 Monte Carlo Landau is rightly celebrated as one of the era's best personal coupes. Its combination of visual elegance, luxurious interior appointments, and genuine performance makes it stand out in a market crowded with muscle cars and personal luxury vehicles. While some collectors chase early Chevelles or Camaro Z28s for speed and notoriety, those who understand the Monte Carlo Landau appreciate its subtle brilliance. A car that could satisfy the soul, impress the eye, and command respect on the road. It represents an era when American manufacturers understood how to blend comfort, performance, and style into a cohesive package that appealed to both emotion and practicality. The 1976 Monte Carlo Landau wasn't just a car, it was a lifestyle statement, a carefully executed blend of marketing savvy, design elegance, and Chevrolet engineering. It proved that personal luxury coupes could still carry muscle under the hood while offering refinement and presence that few other cars could match. In many ways, it was one of the smartest and most balanced cars of its time, a car that appealed to hearts, minds, and adrenaline all at once. If you want, I can expand further into the rare engine and option combinations for the Monte Carlo Landau, including the 454-powered models and how they turned this personal luxury coupe into a sleeper performance legend.